Okay, we just discussed the politician coming at us, and he's throwing these conceptions and this total amount of bullshit at us through his focus groups and his advertising and the rest of it, and it's pretty meaningless. We know we're fed up with it. People get really tired of seeing the same ads on TV over and over again. In fact, in the last stages of the campaign that Stan Brown just won in Massachusetts, I live in Concord, Massachusetts, you'd go to the grocery store and people were complaining. They were just tired. They had been tired for a week. You know, this is salt on our consciousness with this crap. You know, it doesn't wake them up, it puts them to sleep. It's no wonder then when they get to the voting booth they're kind of pissed off about stuff. Anyway, the politician has sort of made this prison for himself because he's created this way. He has to come at us with advertising, and of course he needs to get money in order to do this, so he gets kind of sucked into the corruption of K Street. That's the lobbyist community in Washington, D.C., if you're not familiar with that term. Anyway, he comes at us through this kind of tunnel of a set of operations in which he tries to sell us his particular brand of BS. And of course, we're not exactly happy with it. Why should we be happy with it? By the time the Democrats and the Republicans are done, we're just given two choices. And as I showed before in a previous video on polls, is we really aren't happy with two choices. If the pollsters asked whether we thought the two choices we had were any good, we'd say no. So how do we relate to this? How do we relate to the fact that the corporations now can spend all the money they want, and it looks like we're screwed? We're totally helpless. But the fact is that whole system of thinking and all that money they want to throw at us depends entirely upon them being able to determine the subject matter of the political conversation. And along that line, along that chain of work by which they approach us to try to set the meaning of the conversation, we can push back, and they are stuck with us. Because when we walk into that focus groups, if we start to say something different in that focus group, if we start to react to a pollster and say, that's a bullshit question, you should ask this question, that pushback is going to change things. And the powers that have aligned themselves to make this use of us are going to have to dance to our tune. Now, is it going to happen overnight? No, it isn't. But let's just think about what's going to happen. Let's imagine for a moment what happens if we start to take up the question of having a new constitution. Well, in order to do that, you really have to ask some very deep questions. And there was a time in the history of the United States when only an elite could really ask those questions. But the fact is since that time, since the time when the founders were mostly the most educated people, and most of your ordinary voters and stuff really didn't have much of an education, although they were pretty much up on a lot of issues in a certain kind of way. The fact is that given the crisis and the more and more waking up that's being produced by the situation of crisis in the United States, the more the electorate is awake to these things. And the fact that Stan Brown won that election was a kind of instinctive pushback along this chain by which the politicians have bound themselves to us. And it's shaking up the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party needs to get shooken up. So let's consider what I said at the very, very beginning, that the Second American Revolution is a war of ideas. So we get in there and we start to talk to each other. We get teabaggers, we get MoveOn.org people, and we get them in the same damn room and we say, if we could make this country the way we wanted it to be from scratch, and if we could do this by finding common ground, what would we demand? Because it's our country. The Constitution is a temporary grant of power. A temporary grant of power from we the people. And we can mess with it anytime we want to. And if we start to sit around and talk to each other, and years ago when I first proposed this idea, I called the groups that did this renewal groups. You can have a renewal group anytime you have your family over for dinner. You can have a renewal group anytime you got the balls to call up somebody whose opinions you don't like and say, you know, we're all getting screwed by the government. Let's sit down and figure out how we can make them dance to our tune. There's an amazing lot of stuff we can do, but we have to do a very hard piece of work, which is talk to each other and talk about fundamentals. And that means, I'm sorry, maybe reading a book or two. I'll try in these videos to make it possible for people to get these ideas without having to read all the damn books that I've read, you know, and that's the best I can do. And maybe some other people will do it. There's a lot of wisdom out there. There's wisdom all over the place. I'm just checking the time again to make sure I don't run over. There's an amazing a lot of wisdom. There's wisdom in songs. You want to get some wisdom and you're a liberal? Spend a couple days watching country music videos. Country music tells stories. It's like blues, only it's white people blues instead of black people blues, you know? And that's why there's the interplay between rock and roll and country and blues and all this other stuff. Because these things are basically all about what hurts our heart. That's what these songs are about, what hurts our heart. And the fact that they get a little political in a way that maybe we don't like is mostly because the only jargon, the only language we can use is the crap language the politicians have fed to us. But if you look beneath the surface, if you look beneath the surface of country music, or if you look deeper into rock and roll, or if you look deeper into any of the arts that people produce, you will find a language which is really, really full of things that are similar. We're a lot more like each other than the politicians would have us believe. That's one of the ways they get their way, is by dividing us up. Rove was so intent on dividing us up that that's the main thing that he did when he pushed his crap through the Bush administration, and when he sells his crap through the Wall Street Journal where he gets to have a column, and when he sells that same crap through the Fox News, which gives, you know, well, don't want to talk about Fox News. I mean, I'm sort of glad in a way Fox News exists, because it gets so extreme with this hysterical anti-intellectual, somebody talking head who doesn't know anything can get up and make a lot of noise and say, I'm really smart, I know everything, you should believe all my stuff. Well, I don't want you to believe all my stuff, but I'd sure like to shake your head a little bit and say, maybe you could do better. So, what do? We push back along the lines that have been pushed at us, in which the vocabulary and the ideas being discussed in the political dialogue are created. And instead of buying what the politicians and the corporations want to give to us, and the talking heads on TV, we get together and talk to each other. We have our own sort of focus group. And if that starts to happen, you can bet, as the years roll by, the language in which politics is discussed will change. And it will change dramatically. And it isn't like we need new stuff. It's out there. If you get into the depths of really liberal clear thinking or really conservative clear thinking, you'll find a lot of smart stuff. But we have to talk to each other. If there's no we the people talking to each other, it's over. The ball's in our court now. Welcome to the Second American Revolution, a war of ideas.